Joining me now, Democratic Congresswoman from Florida, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's good to see you, so thanks for joining me. May I first ask you about your take on their comments? Because two sources apprised of discussions tell NBC News that those same senior congressional Democrats, let's also add James Clyburn, have privately expressed concerns about Joe Biden's viability, even as they all publicly are backing the president. Are Democrats essentially waiting for President Biden to make his decision whether or not he leaves the race and do so on his own? That's the first question. Then I have a follow-up.
Alex, I know in my public life, I have never known a more resilient human being than Joe Biden. If there is anyone that can turn Thursday night and the aftermath of that into a motivating force going forward to be able to rally the troops and make sure that he can be focused and make sure that we can turn our voters out, it's Joe Biden. And I'll tell you, what my advice to my people at home and across this country are that know that Joe Biden should be reelected president of the United States is with our hands, we should do more door knocking and phone calling than pearl clutching and hand wringing. That is a lot more constructive use of our hands right now. And I know people across this country who support Joe Biden. The polls show Thursday night's debate did not have really much impact on that. This race is close. We need to focus on getting people out in the battleground states. In my home state, we need to make sure that because we're an expansion state, we've got to organize and up and down the ballot, make sure that we can get our people to the polls. And they're going to come to the polls and vote for Joe Biden. I don't know a single person from Thursday night. Maybe they expressed some concern, but not a single person said anything other than they are still supporting Joe Biden.
Okay, so that statement then eradicates my need to ask the question of whether you think it's time for him to get out. You clearly do not think it is time for him to get out at this point. What about the editorial in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution? That is the swing state of Georgia, and it says that President Biden should step aside, and it comes after the New York Times editorial board did the same. Why is there a disconnect between what we're hearing from editorial or opinion pages and from Democratic members of Congress? And I'm not throwing you into this necessarily individually, but just in general, there doesn't seem to be a lot of public discussion from our elected officials about what is being said, not only in media circles or at least editorial boards, but among just the average person. I bet there are folks in your constituency who are saying, I think it's time for him to get out. Shouldn't it be addressed?
These editorials, these, backroom whisper campaigns, those are all coming and emanating from elites. I mean, the folks that I talk to in my district and when I travel around the country and talk to voters, they're not wondering what the New York Times or the Atlanta Journal-Constitution thinks to drive their decision about who they're voting for. What drives their decision about who they're voting for is the fact that Joe Biden has brought prescription drug costs down, that he's invested massive amounts of resources, the most in modern times, in infrastructure, that he helped cut people's debt with student loans. And Thursday night, they saw a former president who, could not possibly have lied more, who essentially lied about the millions of people that died during COVID as a result of his policies, about inflation going up as a result of his COVID policies, the fact that he bragged about Roe v. Wade, and the fact that now there are millions of women who have had their reproductive freedom ripped away from them. My daughters have less rights right now than I did growing up as an adult. That is what is going to drive people's decisions at the ballot box. So we need to double down on organization right now and focus on that we have an election in just 5 months.
Donald Trump has changed his tune. Prior to the debate, he would talk about Joe Biden in brutal ways and undermine his capacity for leadership. And yet, since then, multiple times, he has said he doesn't think Joe Biden will drop out because he's polling better than any of the potential replacements. What do you think's behind his flip? I'm not asking you to get inside his mind. That's a job that few, if anyone, can do. But what do you think he's doing that for?
Donald Trump is an unhinged, maniacal authoritarian. And so I have no idea what's behind his, addled mind that is really spent most of the time dreaming up ways to propose policies that would overturn our democracy, get ready to overturn an election like he attempted to do on January 6th. The American people are not dumb, Alex. They understand the contrast and the difference between these two men. They know that we have a good and decent man and in the White House right now, and they had an evil and terrible person in the White House almost 4 years ago. And at the end of the day, they're going to go to that ballot box and they're going to say, you know what? I want to make sure that I vote for a president who's going to have my back. And it's not even a close call when that's the driving factor in most voters' decisions when they decide who they're voting for in November. That's why Joe Biden's going to continue to be our president.
Let me ask you about something that we got. This is from Capitol Hill. Congressman Seth Moulton posted on social media a photo of a poster hanging outside the office of Republican Congressman Matt Rosendale. And one says, IVF destroys more life than Planned Parenthood. There's another one that says, if you believe life begins at conception, as I do, there is no difference between an abortion and the destruction of an IVF embryo. Are you seeing more extreme stances on reproductive rights becoming more accepted in Congress? I mean, that's a pretty blatant post outside of that congressman's door.
Not only that, but Matt Rosendale, whose office those posters are posted outside of, actually proposed an amendment to make IVF illegal because he said it was immoral. You had Republicans in the United States Senate vote down a bill that would have made sure that we could codify in vitro fertilization and protect the ability of families to decide when and if they are going to start a family. My twins were conceived through IVF, Alex. When I was 29 years old, my husband and I had difficulty conceiving. And thank God we were able to use IVF to be able to conceive. And then I have a younger daughter who was conceived naturally. But as a breast cancer survivor who has the BRCA2 mutation, I'll tell you what Republican opposition to IVF means. It means that when my children decide to have their children, if IVF were banned, now that you can test an embryo for genetic mutations, and my children could decide to use IVF to end generational cancer in our family, the Republican position would continue generational cancer and other diseases in millions of families. That's what's immoral. And how dare Matt Rosendale suggest that the birth of my children were immoral? That is the Republican Party of today, and it's outrageous.
You know what? I'm not going to thank you as a congresswoman. I'm going to thank you as a fierce, world-class mom, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Good to hear all that. Thank you for sharing.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.